Welcome to the podcast on North American literature hosted by the research group Studies in American Literature and Culture from the University of Granada.
Today we will be discussing the possible influence of The Coquette by Hannah WebsterFoster in Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I'm Marina, the interviewer for today's topic, and Marta will be answering our questions. Thanks for being here today, Marta.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be part of this podcast. I'm excited to present my ideas on their relation, especially regarding how both strong female protagonists are portrayed.
That's right. Elisa and Scarlett are about to be analyzing a different perspective today. What can you tell us about them to present them to the audience?
Well, they surely are some complex characters. They simultaneously embody and challenge prevailing ideas of femininity, freedom, and moral conduct in their respective historical contexts. The Coquette, an epistolary novel from the late 18th century, is marked by the tension between the new ideas of freedom, rising with the Enlightenment, and the code of conduct that strictly condemns acts of coquetry like Elisa's. A century and a half later, Gone with the Wind situates its narrative in the American South during the Civil War and Reconstruction eras, exploring a radically different yet equally conflicting conception of freedom. Scarlett portrays moral contradictions to the Southern ideals, while she shows a traditional mindset.
These women are definitely complex to understand. Firstly, in which ways do they oppose the moral in the high American society? What do they have in common regarding their behavior?
To begin with, both women fall into the stereotype of a coquette. It's our first impression of them as readers. We discover very early on the novels their flirtatious nature, and that set some expectation on the reader. Elisa is even lectured by their friends for her behavior. She has recently become a widow, but she wants to come back to social activity soon, and especially to flirt with men. Similarly, Scarlett, in one of the most famous passages, in a barbecue with other family friends before the war started, she flirts with multiple men. She admits to do it even though other female friends like those men, and even if she doesn't even like them as much. She is the most hard-hearted girl in Georgia, as is described in the novel. The attitude of the female protagonist is morally incorrect by the standards of their age. They manipulate men with learned skills and acknowledging their beauty. We are also told that neither of them seek for marriage at the beginning of their stories. In the case of Elisa, Mr. Boyer tries to marry her and her friends try to persuade her to accept. But, as it's said on the book, she has this desire to enjoy the little freedom she can find in her youth. This can actually be seen as a radically modern perspective and desire, a desire for autonomy and sexual freedom. Under the standards of the age, it was an outrageous behavior though, and she will be heavily judged and punished by the author. She is caught with another man, Major Sanford, who acts in the same way as her, as a womanizer, but he is never judged as hurt. The Coquette, then, is not simply an allegory of seduction. The generic shift from sermon to novel entails a transformation of focus and philosophy. Set within a specific context of limiting marriage laws and restrictive social manners, the novel is less a story of the wages of sin than a study of the wages of marriage. A similar interpretation is possible for Scarlett's action. Scarlett doesn't only defy society's expectation by flirting at a young age, but also as she matures and as she has to face the problems of the world, she will marry Charles, and later on Frank, and lastly Red, in order to survive. She repeats multiple times along the novel that she is afraid of being hungry again. She acts out of necessity, even if she can also be seen as cruel, egocentric, and superficial. Every vision is true. She is not an angel, she does groan, and we cannot obviously obvious the racist behavior, for example, in the novel. However, she follows a philosophy based on surviving, personal freedom, and economic stability.
You have talked about different characters also playing an important role in the decisions and on how our female leaders are portrayed. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Surely. Well, in the case of the Coquette, the influence of her friends Lucy and Miss Richmond is quite obvious. There's a constant comparison between Elisa and the correct behavior of her friends, quite an example of how women should act. Female friendship is also a major central point on Gone with the Wind, and specifically the character of Melanie works as a counterpoint to Scarlett. Melanie is far from scandalous, she's even detached from gossip, and defends Scarlett when all the other women assure she's having an affair with Ashley. Ashley is Melanie's husband, and that specific moment is full of irony and fully shows their difference. Since Scarlett has actually been in love with Ashley for the longest time, and there obviously were some feelings between them. That specific rumor was only fake because of that moment, and Melanie was right to deny it, but it could perfectly have been true.
And what about male characters in the novels? What role do they have?
They certainly are interesting to analyze too, considering even those who act similarly to Elisa and Scarlett are never punished or judged in the same way as women. In The Coquette, partially, there's also a common understanding that Sanford, the man Elisa keeps choosing instead of marrying Mr. Boyer, was partially guilty for her fate too. He himself is married to another woman and is referred multiple times as a bad man. However, in the end, there is a brutal contrast between Elisa's last days, completely abandoned and dying alone, to Major Sanfords, who can still live freely. They will cry her, but mostly reprimand her actions and highlight the lustful behaviors that took her to that point. In Scarlett's case, her story with Red along the years has been romanticized in media, but it's clearly an example of an abusive relationship. Even one of the most famous passages of them, seen for many years as a sensual scene, is from today's understanding a rape. From his violence to her resistance, it was clearly non-consensual, but he is never reprimanded for that. The end of the novel itself, when he is an obvious alcoholic and has already left her once with their child, and yet he has the audacity to leave her completely alone again, is not remembered by many as bad as Scarlett's action, and it's not as remarkable as their love story. For Elisa, her ending is pretty similar to Scarlett's, and just as Red, Stanford does not seem to be condemned in the same way as her. He shows a jealous behavior throughout the whole novel, same as Red, and he has no real intentions of marrying her. Even he marries another woman. He does not care about her wellness and abandons her, pregnant with their child, and let her die alone in a dirty inn. And yet, none of the women seem to realize the ground of their men. Elisa chooses herself to go to the inn and escapes from her life for him, and Scarlett realizes just in the end, once abandoned, that she really loved Red all the time ago. They show undoubtable independence and fears and try many times along their lives to live freely, but they cannot see the cruelty by which they are treated by the men they love. That reflects that even if they try to escape from society's patterns, it is unconsciously and because of their violent personality, and they cannot avoid living in it. They cannot change a pattern of violence they do not see a problem in. They cannot signal their immense actions limiting their own lives once they are manipulated into their relationship because deep in, they also feel that is their fault for their coquettish. They end up dependent on men just in the way they try to avoid, and only us, as readers, seem to see the problem behind the toxicity of Stanford and Red from our modernity. Well, they cannot do nothing to avoid their lonely ending. Stanford and Red can actually enjoy their freedom. If they do not care about society's norms, there won't be any harsh punishment, except maybe some gossip and bad looks and recrimination from other members of society. But they can still work, live their life as they please, marry again, or just flee with more women. While Scarlett and Elisa were completely lost without them, resulting even in the death of Elisa, Sanford and Red will keep their lives after the novel's end. Elisa and Scarlett's little victories in their freedom seem nothing in retrospective once we know their ending, and once we compare them with the main characters. And yet, they are the protagonists, and not men. It's through their eyes we see their respective life and society. It's through their lives we prove the wrongs in the very core of their society. It's through their heart they try to escape what is imposed to them to follow their desires, and it's thanks to their heart, not hidden, even if they have to hide other aspects of their lives, that we feel so deeply their emotions and their drama until the very end of their lives, whether metaphorically or literally.
Thank you so much for your time on today's episode. Our listeners hopefully now have an insight on both books.
Hopefully so. Thank you so much for having me today. I had a great time and I can't wait to come back for another episode.